Hello, Modern here. In today's video I want to show you my Human Lightning Storm Thunder God Druid build for Diablo 4. This build obviously utilizes the Lightning Storm spell and is very light on unique items, with only one being featured in here, Tybalt's Will. You might accidentally think this build is bad because we're not going to use the Tempest Draw helmet, but no, we are looking at peak Druid performance instead, with 3 companion abilities being used in this bad boy. The biggest benefit of foregoing Tempest Draw are the additional defenses through resistances, total armor, HP and additional DR. This lets us comfortably slot in Tybalt's Will for additional resource generation and up to 40% more damage. The Vampiric Power Metamorphosis makes this possible, but even without the pet we will barely have any spirit issues at all. Great news for basically everyone. As far as content goes, this build is more than capable of clearing NM hundreds with ease. Bosses are admittedly a little bit harder to deal with, but we still melt them relatively fast. So I'm going to leave you with some extended gameplay. Well, kind of. There is a disclaimer I need to put out there. This build suffers from a very frustrating bug based around dashing while channeling a skill. Doing so will lock your character in place, making it impossible to move around and cast any spells for multiple seconds. That's pretty damn bad. Luckily we can circumvent this by tapping Lightning Storm in most situations. This will result in more damage than just channeling the skill, and you will also be a lot more mobile. Also don't forget your finger strength will also increase considerably, or you will get carpal tunnel. Anyway, it's a benefit, I guess. But it doesn't mean we will never channel Lightning Storm. Regular tunnel events like shrines or chests are a pleasure to do with this skill. You just hold down the button and stand in place. Most of the dungeon, however, will be done by playing Lightning Storm like a regular spell. Now with that said, let's have a look at the talent planner. It's a fully written guide with multiple chapters. If you want to read up on something, you can do that just fine. If you want a more detailed look at leveling with this one, I can recommend you my Thunder God leveling build, specifically tailored towards this build. You can change to the Endgame version once you get the Earthen Might aspect up and running. And if you have any questions or remarks, make sure to ask in the comments or on my Discord. So let's start with the skill tree. Since we are not a leveling build, don't look at the leveling here. It's mumble jumble and I picked the passives later, respect a few times. So don't pay attention to this section. If you want the leveling experience, scroll down to the leveling section right here, click on this link and it will open up the leveling version of this build. Now for the skill tree, we pick 1 point in Earthen Spike and Enhanced Earthen Spike. We're going to regularly use Earthen Spike to replenish our spirit. Then we max out our Lightning Storm, get Enhanced Lightning Storm and Primal Lightning Storm. Enhanced Lightning Storm will save our charges, so the size of the Lightning Storm itself, so we can move on from pack to pack for 6 seconds. Now for this one you need to keep a few rules in mind. Down below, this section, Lightning Storm mechanics, you will see 0 stages, so the regular strike you will press and you will not channel this one, has only 1 strike and no radius. This should never be used and only be used for channeling. Smaller bosses, humanoid bosses, around your size will need the first stage to be consistent in damage. If you're fighting a larger boss, like for example a tree sentinel that is like 4 times your size, you want to increase the stages to at least 2. This means you're holding the button down, then you see 1 strike, then 2 strikes and then 3 strike. After the 3rd strike, you want to release the button and start to tap your key. This will keep it at stage 2 and you'll very consistently hit the boss with 3 strikes. This means if your lightning strike is dealing 70% per strike, you're now dealing 210%. Because 3 strikes are hitting the boss. This is incredible. When you're running through the dungeon, this means regular packs, you want to have the highest stage possible, so stage 4 or higher. This is also true for world bosses where every single strike will hit them because they're so large. Otherwise, keep the stages below that. There is however an inconvenience. There is no display at which stage you are currently at. So for regular play, you will be at the highest stage most of the time, running through the dungeon. Before the boss, the end boss of the dungeon, you're going to drop off your charges, stack them up to 2 or 3 depending on the boss, and then fight the boss like that. That's the only time you're going to ever look at the stages. Otherwise, channel them to the fullest, to the maximum. Anyway, let's get back to the skill tree. We pick up 3 points in Wild Heart, 3 points in Wild Impulse, 3 points in Ancestral Fortitude. We do not pick up Vigilance because we have no defensive cooldowns. We pick up Wolves, Enhanced Wolves and Ferocious Wolves. Ferocious Wolves will now have a lucky hit chance to fortify us for 8% of our maximum life, so now have a fortify source during boss fights. Wolves are now considerably tankier because of how defenses work. They will still die, however they respawn automatically, so you will have them up basically 99% of the time. We then pick up Poison Creeper, Enhanced Poison Creeper and Brutal Poison Creeper, increasing our critical strike chance when we use our Poison Creeper. We further combine this one with a Spirit Boon, we can see here. So on a critical strike, we have a lucky hit chance to reset the cooldowns. We are going to regularly use our Poison Creeper to stun lock enemies. So immobilize them and we can then crit them to reset the cooldown, and we immobilize them again. They are poisoned, so we deal more damage and so on and so forth. So this one is an essential skill, especially for groups of enemies. However, for bosses, they are also very useful. Poison Creepers automatically poison single target enemies with the passive portion of the skill. Every 7 seconds, we poison an enemy for 6 seconds. So we basically always have poison up, so we can benefit from Envenom and DR while enemies are poisoned, and don't need Tempest Rod to do this. Poison Creeper takes care of this. Remember, we want to use Poison Creeper for groups of enemies, to bind the leads in place, to nuke them, so they are going to be poisoned anyway, and immobilized, which boosts our damage even further. Then we have the Ravens, which then can increase our critical strike chance by 8%. We have 4 of them, so we now have 2 wolves, we have 1 poison creeper and 3 ravens. With the aspect of the stampede, we are going to increase our companions by 1. So we have 3 companions here, so we get 3 additional ones. So we have 2 poison creepers, 3 wolves and 4 ravens, which means we have 9 companions, and we have the aspect of the shepherd, which increases our damage by 15% per active companion, because we have a 50% bonus on amulets. So we get 135% more damage just because we have the pets, and they give us additional benefits. So this one is immense for this build. It's one of the best ways to scale Lightning Storm. The rest of the tree is very self-explanatory. 1 point in elemental exposure, charged atmosphere, 3 points in bad omen, and 3 points in electric shock to improve our damage. Then we have neurotoxin, because we need 1 point into this one to get access to Envenom, which is 30% more damage with critical strikes. This is an additional source to the 50% we already have through the regular crit. We then pick up Petrify for another 30 or 50% boost versus bosses. This is again another more multiplier. So we have now 50% through the regular critical strike, 30% through Envenom, possibly 60% if we have 3 ranks to Envenom on our Emmy. And then we have 50% through Petrify. So we want to crit. With this build at endgame, you will receive around 50 to 65% critical strike chance baseline. And we also have Earth Might to boost this one to 100% if we proc this one. This will also recover our spirit. However, we are not dependent on this one to receive our critical strikes. Then we pick up Defiance, Natural Disaster and Resonance, and lastly Cycle of Life, which then combined with the Vampiric Power Undying will now heal us for 6% per cast of our Lightning Storm. If we tap the button, we're going to heal a lot. This basically sums up their skill tree. So since I already mentioned this one, let's go over the Vampiric Powers. We have Prey on the Weak, we have Undying, we have Sanguine Brace, we have Accursed Touch, and we have Metamorphosis. So those are quite interesting to deal with, especially Sanguine Brace. Sanguine Brace will now give us a Fortify source for 6% of our base life whenever we kill an enemy. So during dungeons, we have basically always 100% Fortify. While we have more than 50% of our maximum life as Fortify, we get an additional 8% chance to crit. We now can use the aspect of Retaliation to its fullest potential. 40% more damage. And like I said, during boss fights, you usually run up to the boss or have ads that spawn, so you can get this one up and running very fast. You also have your wolves that increase your Fortify by 8% on a lucky hit. Now we also want to stack Vulnerable on enemies, so we have a Cursed Touch. 44% chance to inflict Vampiric Curse. With Prey on the Weak, we now also, with the Vampiric Curse, inflict Vulnerable, which increases our damage by 20% and another 16% through Prey on the Weak. The second portion of a Cursed Touch, so the Ghost, will basically never occur since we don't have a defensive cooldown. And Metamorphosis pairs very nicely with Tybalt's Will. It also gives us a much better dash, so double the range or even triple the range. It's much faster, it is instantaneous, so there is no delay, and you get Unstoppable. So we don't need to waste one of our precious skill slots for an Unstoppable skill. Now Tybalt's Will now, every time we Metamorphosis, and we do not have the buff of the Unstoppable, so every 4 seconds, we recover our primary resource, which is Spirit. With a little bit of resource generation on, for example, the offhand or the rings that you can potentially obtain, you can boost this power, but we are not going to best slot this in this build. As I already teased, crit, maximum life, damage to distant, damage to close is the most important. I will go over this one a little bit later. Now those are the Vampiric Powers. As for the other aspects, as for the Spirit Boons, we go with Wariness, we go with Iron Feathers for a 40% more multiplier to a maximum life. This one is a more multiplier. Keep that in mind. When we find +4 to maximum life on the Paragon Board, this one multiplies it by 1.14. 4%. So it's like picking up 4.5% maximum life instead. For the wolf, pack leader and energize, so energy recovery and resets on our poison creeper. And for snake, we want calm before the storm because we want to reset our petrify as fast as possible, and this one helps a lot. Now for the equipment. Technically, you could use the Tempest Straw helmet. It will benefit the build. However, you're going to lose defenses. This build does not struggle for damage, so we want to have as much defensive options as possible. For this, on the helmet, we want the aspect of the protector. When we engage enemies, especially poison enemies, having a barrier up and running will make this character much tankier. We have no other sources of barrier, and poison is best stopped through barriers. On the chest, aspect of disobedience, because we have total armor on our helmet, on our chest and on our amulet, we are going to hit the cap of around 14k armor very fast with this one, even if we stack this one only to 50%. This will make it possible to run high tier dungeons, because physical attacks will then see a damage reduction of 85%. For the gloves, aspect of the stampede, you can put this one on the rings, doesn't matter. The bonus on here is basically the same, so it doesn't matter if you have this aspect on the gloves or on the rings or on the weapon. All of the aspects here are offensive aspects. The only one you want to have on the amulet strictly is the aspect of the shepherd, or the shepherd's aspect. This will get a 50% bonus to the more multiplier you get to core skills for companions. Since we have 9 companions, because of the aspect of the stampede, we now have a 135% damage bonus. Really neat. Next, for the boots, the ghost walk aspect, we get a 25% movement speed bonus, and we can move through enemies, which is quite nice. So when we metamorphose, we get the ghost walk aspect. Very easy to trigger. Then we have the mighty storm aspect. This will allow us to use the Earth Might keystone passive. Without this aspect, this build doesn't function, so make sure to have this aspect before you spec this. Then we have the rune worker's conduit. Every around 0.5 seconds, a lightning bolt will strike enemies around you. Only one will be targeted. However, this lightning strike can deal AoE damage, and it deals huge amounts of damage. I mean like 150 to 250k per strike. So it's really nice to have on this build. It's basically additional lightning strikes you also cast. And you can stack this one up infinitely. So you basically always have this one up and running after you start playing. It's really nice passive bonus damage. And then you have the lightning dancer aspect, which now triggers on a critical strike 3 dancing bolts. Those deal a flat amount of damage and helps a lot with AoE clearing. And lastly, the aspect of retaliation, 40% more damage based on the fortify. We are basically always having 100% fortifier, so this one always gives us the full benefit. And for the unique, we have Tybalt's Will. If you do not have this one, aspect of might is really nice. So the 20% DR on a basic attack. So if you do not have Tybalt's Will, go with regular pants with total armor, so you don't actually need to run disobedience and can use something else. Doesn't really matter. But Tybalt's Will, really good for this build. We trigger this one with metamorphosis and dashes, and we get a 40% more damage multiplier by using this item. For the gems, emeralds in the weapon, rubies in the armor, and for the jewelry, match your resistances first, then slot in skulls. It is not necessary to use skulls here. It is really not. The druid gets so much free armor and you have free total armor FXS, so you really don't need it. Max out your resistances to 70%. Really important. Doesn't matter in what combination. You have your helmet, you have your chest, you have your boots to do this. However, if you're lacking something, slot it in your rings. As for the stats, total armor, maximum life, resistances on the helmet, same with the chest. Damage reduction from close enemies is a priority stat, so you have some damage reduction on this character. I highly recommend this one. However, we are also getting some damage reduction versus poisoned on the offhand. It's not strictly necessary. I didn't have this one, I only had this one on the offhand and still managed to clear a 99 Nightmare Dungeon. For the gloves, ranks to Lightning Storm, Crit Strike chance, Lucky Hit chance, if you can manage. I have Dexterity on my gloves and a Lucky Hit chance to restore primary resource. Really nice to have. You can also get this one on the offhand, however it's not necessary. For the pants, if you do not have Tybalt's Will, total armor, maximum life, damage reduction while injured. For the boots, movement speed, spirit cost reduction and resistances. For the amulet, movement speed, total armor, spirit cost reduction, ranks to envenom. For both rings, crit strike chance, maximum life, damage to distant, damage to close. For the weapon, damage to close, damage to distant, willpower, all stats. And for the offhand, crit strike chance all stats, spirit cost reduction, and damage reduction from enemies that are poisoned. Why are we using damage to close and damage to distant on the rings and the weapon? Very easy. In the Paragon Board, there is the Thunderstruck legendary node. That's one of the first things we grab. 20% of our damage to close and damage to distant bonuses are now a multiplicative bonus. With all the bonuses you can find on the gear and on the Paragon Board, you can get this one to around 50%, maybe push 60%. You can read up on defenses and your damage scaling down below here. There is a massive section for defenses and a massive section for damage scaling. Here is the calculation for the damage. Here is recommendations for Sheko and Godslayer Crown. If you have those items, you can use them instead of the more defensive option. Thunderstruck double dips. Attack speed is a valuable option since we are not always holding down the channel button, but it's not needed on the build. If you get this one, it's beneficial, but really not that needed. And for the defensive options, like I said, resistances are really hard to get on the Druid. Make sure to cap those because Nightmare Dungeon 70 plus will be a drag. You will suffer if you do not have your resistances topped. Total armor and movement speed also priority stats. Now for the gameplay strategy, channel your Lightning Storm to the desired stage. So for AoE clearing, it's 5 or 4, and then run through the dungeon. If you experience a section with a lot of elite enemies, try to walk up to them or metamorphose dash to them, then use your poison creeper, then petrify, then nuke them. If you run out of spirit, weave in your earthen spikes for spirit, and this one also has a very high chance to trigger earthen might. For boss strategy, stage 2 or stage 3, then use petrify. Your poison creeper will poison the enemy passively, so you just unload your lightning storm on them basically all the time. You don't need to fish for earthen might procs. If you get low on spirit, use your earthen spike for spirit and earthen might procs. Also don't forget to metamorphosis dash through the enemy to apply your vulnerable status if it drops off. Also to reapply the 40% more damage multiplier to you and to recover some spirit. Something I get a lot, since we are requiring so many aspects, it is much more beneficial to run a one-hander and offhand, especially since your lightning storm benefits through the attack speed of the base weapon than a regular two-handed weapon. Yes, you will see slightly higher damage numbers with a two-handed weapon, but a one-hand axe and an offhand is the superior option in basically almost all cases. And for the boots, more dashes are always better, so that's your mobility. You want to dash charges. If you have 4 charges and need to get out, you're golden. If you only have 1 charge and you wasted it, tough luck. Okay, and now the Paragon Board. The Paragon Board has a few things that I need to talk about. The first one being Fulminate. Fulminate works on all lightning damage. This means the Dancers aspect and the lightning bolt you trigger through the Conduit aspect. This one goes into the first board. All the side stuff, like for example the armor nodes and the life nodes here, you will pick up later. Prioritize the glyph slots. Then you attach the Thunderstruck board. This one is the second board. Path immediately to the next board. So on the left side, you will pick up Ancestral Guidance. That's the third board. And pick up the legendary node. That's 30% more damage and another around 10 to 20% at low levels. Afterwards, path through here, grab the glyph node, slot in spirit. This one needs the glyph radius increase at 15. Otherwise, you won't be able to activate this one with those dexterity nodes being outside the range. Unlock the next board, which will give you access to the territorial glyph and to the rare super fused resilience node. Now this one is very easy to trigger through the requirements and decreases the poison damage over time by a substantial amount. That's 13% just through one singular node. Poison damage is the most deadly damage type in the game, so having this one up and running is really strong. You also get resistances here. Afterwards we get back to the Thunderstruck board, have through the lightning resilience nodes here. That's 6% more life and 20% additional lightning resistance, 5 here, 2% life here, 5 resistance here. A really strong cluster for resistances and survivability. Then we are going to ignore this glyph slot right now because it's not the best. We want to have the inner board first. So unlock this one, get this one to 15 to unlock the requirement. That's 10% more damage and you get around 400 armor here. With the additional magic nodes here, and the additional rare node here, you get on this board around 600 armor. Really good board. Next on the Thunderstruck board, we get to the electrocution glyph, slot this one in and path to the next board, grab Heightened Malice. Heightened Malice will give us, whenever we Poison Creeper, a massive more damage multiplier. And then fill out the glyphs. Your priority glyphs are the Spirit Glyph, the Keeper Glyph, then the Territorial Glyph, Fulminate afterwards, and lastly the Electrocution Glyph. So this sums up the build guide. If you have any questions or remarks, please comment down below or visit my Discord. Please leave a like if you like this video, helps a lot. Subscribe if you haven't already. You can also join the channel membership or leave a donation if you have the spare coin. So see you next time and bye.